Politics, economics, culture. Social media has dominated it all. The boom of social media has brought with it new realities and immense possibilities. It's guaranteed connectivity. It has amplified opinion. It blasts information. It amplifies commerce. It ensures convenience. It has brought new addictions. It has given birth to innovations like never before. Social media has brought with it the new age revolution, from big tech to homegrown networks, from netizens to first-time users. Social media has penetrated every part of India. And today, a digital India is booming in the era of social media. But social power of social media comes with new age responsibilities, new challenges, and revised visions. For the first time ever, every issue, every advantage, every concern, and every potential will be addressed. The biggest players of social media, the budding entrepreneurs, the influencers, the movers and shakers, the global tech leaders unite on a single virtual stage. And it's all about social media. Republic TV presents India's first of its kind Social Media Summit 2021. Hello and thank you for joining us on a special broadcast here at the Republic Media Network. Staying connected with people around the world is perhaps the biggest blessing of technology. Think about it. Is there ever a moment, a minute, an hour, does a day go by without you being connected either via social media or the internet? The way we lead our lives in a certain way and the subsequent effects of the internet, the social media, has in many ways left people enthralled. It's also left people thinking. Nupur.
Absolutely. Now, in fact, it is with this thought in mind that the Republic Media Network is hosting the first edition of the Social Media Summit 2021. This is a first of its kind summit that brings together the best minds from different digital and social media avenues, from big tech to Indian unicorns, from social media stakeholders to voices from the government onto a single platform.
So, Nupur, let's get the Social Media Summit 2021 started with first a one-on-one session with Ajit Mohan, the Vice President and Managing Director at Facebook India, with Arnab Goswami, Editor-in-Chief of the Republic Media Network, on bringing the world closer. Here's a freewheeling conversation that talks about regulation, accountability, and how video is the new future, and the need for platforms to comply with the law of the land. 23% of India is hooked on to one platform. 300 million Indians are connected by one platform. A platform that has eliminated borders. A platform that has become a social media conglomerate. A platform that has changed the game. Facebook has revolutionized the internet. Today, Facebook India's Vice President and Managing Director Ajit Mohan joins Republic Media Network's Editor-in-Chief Arnab Goswami at the Social Media Summit for a fireside chat on bringing the world closer.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Social Media Summit here on Republic. When we conceived the idea of the Social Media Summit, the essential premise was that the subject on which there is the most conversation, which is seen to be a medium, has sometimes become the message. And over the last 6 months to 1 year, we've had an incredible amount of conversation about social media, about regulations on social media, about the responsibility of social media. And these conversations are not in isolation. Linked to the conversation is the fact that the internet has grown dramatically over the last decade. At the end of the day, there is so much penetration, so much usage, so much accessibility, so much bandwidth, and most important in recent years, so much affordability. So neither is the social media an elite phenomenon, neither is the internet an elite phenomenon, and truly viewers, especially younger people watching this today, might find it surprising that I'm saying it. This was exactly the way it was 10 years back. 10 years back, social media, the use of the internet on mobile devices, was seen to be a privilege of the elite, and that's no longer the case. So when things change, things explode very often. And when things explode, there are lots of interests which come in. There are corporate interests, there are political interests, there are social interests, there are social groups, and very often we find ourselves right in the middle of it, right at the vortex of it. And the idea, therefore, of the Social Media Summit, to put it succinctly, is to ensure that these conversations happen sometimes in an environment where we take 2 steps back, away from our role as stakeholders or as users, and say, let's look at it as something in which the future of the country or the future of the world is vested. How can we improve things? Can we have a conversation? You look at America, look at Western Europe, the debates between social media giants, digital companies and governments are acrimonious, and it has been here in India as well. Is this necessary? Is there a way out? So many of things to talk about, and I thought the best person would be someone who's a massive stakeholder, Vice President and Managing Director of Facebook India, Ajit Mohan. Very happy to see you, Ajit, here today. You are one of the biggest players as far as the entire social media phenomenon in India is concerned, and want to start by saying, viewers, we know that 23% of the Indian population is on Facebook, 23%. Now, what does this mean? This means that no conversation on social media can be really complete without discussing the Facebook phenomenon, the role of Facebook. And that's why I called Ajit to have a free-feeling chat with me. Ajit, first of all, thanks. Thank you for joining us. And I hope that you'll really open up in this conversation. And a lot of people who are users of Facebook, even those who are not users of Facebook, many stakeholders will be watching what you say here today. So it means a lot that you have joined us here on this summit. So thank you very much. How are things going for you at Facebook? I mean, to put it bluntly and put it simple, do you sometimes feel a little bit, do you feel a sense of trepidation? You know, you were other social media companies which have been in conflict. Do you have to operate watching your back always? Are you, as the managing director of Facebook in our country, a little cautious? Is that because, is that the way you've been forced to be, or?
No, Arnab. I think neither trepidation nor caution. I approach it with the framework that you just articulated, Arnab, which is platforms like ours. Facebook as a company, our family of apps covers Facebook app, Instagram, and WhatsApp. There are nearly 420 million users of the Facebook app in India. WhatsApp is an app that is used by everyone through the day. We are deeply immersed in the fabric of India, Arnab, and with that kind of consequential presence, scrutiny will come. And I think that's fair. And we approach it in the context of what you outlined. This is a country where in a very short period of time, in less than 5 years, you've had 500, 600 million people, new people come onto the internet with access to affordable mobile broadband.
Yep.
You're entirely right. I think you circled back 10 years ago or 5 years ago, data was so expensive, access to the internet was a privilege. That's changed. Invariably, the first port of call for people who are coming onto the internet is WhatsApp or Facebook, increasingly Instagram. And for me, I look at this role with a lot of responsibility, with a lot of hope, and the orientation that we bring in is, how can we be an ally for a country that is in the middle of this exciting economic and social transformation? And because we are deeply embedded in the fabric, because we play a role in people's daily lives, we are in the middle of it. And therefore, as you mentioned, whether journalists or the government, it's fair for us to be scrutinized to make sure that we are doing what is right by the country. And I think that's fair, Arnab.
Yeah. By the way, Ajit, you know, many people would have expected the MD of Facebook to come with 2 boxing gloves saying, I'm going to war with the government. You know, I won't believe in regulation. It doesn't apply to me. It's thwarting my free speech. You don't seem to sound like that. Firstly, how come you're so relaxed? Secondly, what kind of regulations do we need? You've been talking about it, and I'm glad we dived into it. What kind of regulations do we need?
I think if I step back, Arnab, in the spirit of this conversation, if you look at how the internet has evolved in the last 15 or 20 years, just like whenever a new thing comes onto the scene with a lot of explosive growth and innovation, very often there aren't a lot of traffic lights guiding how that ecosystem grows.
True.
I think this has been true in the history of technology innovation over a very long period of time. And I think it was true for the internet as well. And I think over the last 4 or 5 years in particular, once we got a handle on what was happening, we understood the explosive positive impact of the internet. We also understood that it comes with harm. It comes with a lot of actors that can cause harm. And therefore, it is fair that there are traffic lights. There are rules and regulations around the governance of the internet. And I think even as a company, Arnab, especially over the last few years, we have leaned in and said, we welcome regulation. And to your question, I think there are at least 2 or 3 parts of regulation that I think would be helpful. One obviously would be, how do we create rules that are interoperable across the world? I think the power of the internet was that it had the power to connect every person on the planet. You can connect societies that are vastly different from each other. And yet, the ethos of the internet is closest to the open, free society that India is. And therefore, as different countries are thinking about the rules, I think India has a particular role to play because the spirit of the internet is the spirit of India. And therefore, one is how do we preserve the ability to drive innovation and yet have rules that allow interconnectedness between different societies? I can think of another one, which is how do we make sure that there is transparency on how data is used? And how do we make sure that users have control over the data? Users telling platforms, whether that's your platform or my platform, Arnab, I want you to use the data in this manner, and I don't want you to use the data in this manner. That distinction that allows the users greater control over data, and for companies to provide greater transparency over how the data is used. I'll even go one step further, and I think this is not a conversation that we have had, which is how do we even have more transparency around algorithms? We know that at the center of innovation is the advance in technology and machine learning and AI. And that means that we are all reliant on algorithms to drive a lot of that innovation. But I do think it's time to have the conversation about how do we give users agency over the impact of the algorithm in their own lives? And I think that comes with greater transparency and greater agency. And we think that's another area that deserves more attention as well.
What if the users say that, listen, we are only users. We can't take responsibility. We can't take legal responsibility. You're the big company. You have the billions of dollars. You set the rules. You take the responsibility. I'm just a user. I can't afford mistakes. I can't afford lawyers. I can be misguided. Your algorithm may put me in a different direction. I might end up using something. Then how can I take responsibility? That's one thing. You know, users will say, we're just users. We didn't sign up for this. You know what I mean? So just wanted your thoughts on that, because you spoke about something like that some time back.
I agree with you, Arnab. And I look at this in 2 ways, right? The question that you're asking is, what is the responsibility on us as a company? Outside of what the legal framework may be. And outside of the owners or users to make their own choices. I 100% agree with you that I think we have responsibility as a consequential player to be pioneering in these areas, whether it's transparency, whether it's giving users control over data. And the idea of a responsible internet and a safe internet is one that's important to us, Arnab. And a lot of this translates to the articulation of what we call community guidelines. And I think it goes to the heart of your question, which is we have articulated the guidelines for the community in terms of saying, these are the kinds of things that we draw a line around. Abusive behavior, for example, bullying, for example, call for violence, and those community guidelines are transparent. So that's our effort, and that it constantly evolves as well, Arnab. I mean,
Yeah,
we,
of course.
we spend a lot of time providing inputs into it with external research, with the point of view of experts like you, but it's there and it's transparent. And for me, that goes to the heart of saying it's our responsibility, and we will be transparent about it. But it's also possible that many different societies and stakeholders will form a point of view saying, okay, you have the community guidelines, but in our society, in our current context, we may have incremental rules that we want you to follow as well.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere it's about making sure that we are able to do both.
Okay, so did you know that the Taliban has removed the option to view a friends list on Facebook? I've seen that the Facebook has temporarily removed the ability for people to view or search the friends list of accounts in Afghanistan, and has sort of banned the Taliban. Why was this necessary? And more from a question which emerges from that. See, some time back you said something very interesting. You said that globally, and you've been saying this, Ajit, you've been saying that globally we need to come to some kind of an understanding that there needs to be some kind of a global technology framework, you know. So I think you're coming from the point of view that Facebook shouldn't be pushed around differently in different countries. Governments have to agree on a framework, right? Because, you know, and you said this at the NASSCOM, you know, leadership forum, I think, where you said that there need to be rules of the internet, which are global rules. I only gave the example of Taliban. I'd like your response to that as well, but that it's very difficult. My counter view to that would be, it would be very difficult to get people in India or people in Pakistan or people in Bangladesh or people in, you know, in Australia to agree that these are the rules. And there would be many people in India who would say, Ajit, you know, agree with you in principle, but we don't necessarily agree with what the rules in Pakistan would be, or what the rules in even the United Kingdom would be, because we have to go by our rules. And the second thing they would say to you is, Ajit, it's going to take an incredibly long time. How can you get, you know, the United Nations doesn't get to agree on one thing when they all sit together. How are leading countries or even all countries in the world going to come together and agree on global technology rules? Good idea, but impossible to implement.
The first one is, Arnab, we have been quite vocal that even as we argue for interoperable frameworks across the world, and in some ways, Arnab, you know this well, that it goes to the heart of what makes the internet the internet. It does cross boundaries. It does connect societies of different kinds. But at the same time, even as we have called for a global framework or an interoperable framework, I think we've also articulated quite overtly that we see that being influenced by democratic societies. And I think we have even been more overt that we see three big poles. It's the United States, it's Europe, and it's India, that in many ways will decide the future of the open internet. Democracies where, societies where the ethos of democracy is strong, the belief in free expression is very high. And therefore, even as we talk about a multilateral framework, we do believe that there's a special role for India in that framework. And I also think if you look at the number of people on the internet today, 700 million and counting in India, we are a big part of the global internet.
Of course,
so whether on the back of the values or on the back of the size, India has to play a material role. I think the second part of it, as you mentioned, is in a world where there is so much disagreement and there is so much inability to create common frameworks, how are we going to do that for the internet? And it's not an easy one. And we do struggle with it every day, Arnab. And to the specific point that you called out, we have shared this in the past that there are organizations that have been designated by multilateral institutions. And my understanding is that the Taliban is one of those designated organizations which are not allowed to operate on Facebook. And we don't see it as either our job or for us to kind of recognize governments or not. We rely on the multilateral institutions to do it. And the multilateral institutions have articulated a point of view on Taliban that we have embraced, and we follow that. And we don't allow designated organizations like the Taliban to be present on Facebook. And I think that's the only way we can do it, Arnab. I think we will have to rely on institutions that will form a point of view connecting stakeholders and democracies around the world. And we will have to leverage that wisdom to influence our own choices and policies.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, I agree with you. You can't have a very technical definition on these matters. You have to go with your gut instinct. And I'm glad you've taken that position because, Ajit, I have a lot of problems with this growing wokeness, to the point where we become politically correct, to the point where we don't distinguish between hate speech and free speech. For example, someone from the Taliban would say that what I am saying is my free speech, but for me and you, that would amount to hate speech. And then when you're talking about community standards, the question is those standards don't apply, or the Taliban would not recognize it. Brings me to a bigger question now. Tell me one thing. Was it something which, which was on your mind when you took on this role, Ajit, that you are constantly going to have to walk the line between hate speech and free speech? This is a bustling democracy, We have the noisiest but most vibrant democracy, right? And the question would be that there would a lot of people would be knocking on your door saying, Facebook, what I am doing is my free speech. To which I may turn around and say to you, no, Ajit, that is hate speech. But someone would say that is what is allowed under our democracy. Would you then say that, no, I'm going to set the rules? Or would you say, go ask the court, go ask the government? Or would you on your own say that, no, I am going to manage this concern. I take the responsibility. I'm a big organization. I will distinguish between what is hate speech and free speech. Or would you be cautious and say the moment I start doing that, the counter to that would be, Ajit, that you'd be opening a Pandora's box?
I think, Arnab, you're asking a question around content moderation that has been at the heart of a lot of thinking from the company for quite a while now.
Yeah.
And I must confess this. I think we have a positive bias towards free speech. And I think it goes to the founding of the company as well. I think it was started with the idea that this is a platform for all kinds of points of view to exist. And as much as we can, we should expand the canvas of expression and free speech. But it comes with two constraints, Arnab. One is what I pointed out earlier. Our community guidelines do articulate what speech is allowed and not allowed on our platforms. And we do that leveraging our rights as a private company. For example, we don't allow anyone to call for violence on our platform. We don't allow people of a protected characteristic to be attacked. One of the things that we have done in the last few years with our learning from India is to call out caste as a protected characteristic. So there is an articulation of what speech is not allowed, which is legal for us to do, and that is articulated in the community guidelines. But equally, India's law influences it. So when we receive a legal order through a process that has been articulated in the law, in the IT Act, we do comply. When we receive valid legal orders telling us to take down some speech, again, the bias is towards compliance there. But I think you're pointing out that between the bias to expand the canvas of expression, between content moderation influenced by the community guidelines that are articulated transparently, and between the compliance with local law, it does mean that we have to be extremely responsible, extremely nonpartisan, and extremely neutral every day that we wake up and do this.
So I feel there's one area in which I'm personally always prejudiced, and that is my country. And I say I'm prejudiced towards my country. I'm an Indian citizen. I will keep national interest first. If someone were to ask you, Ajit, does national interest matter to you? Does India's national interest matter to Facebook? Question one. And question two would be, do you swear by the law of the country? Swear by Indian law? Because there's been this ongoing debate that American digital media giants feel more responsible towards American law than Indian law. So could you just answer those 2 points, please?
Yeah,
because
course.
I think all our viewers would want some reassurance on that.
Yeah, and I think as clearly as I can articulate, Arnab, I want to kind of state 2 or 3 things. One, we do sometimes give a tag to companies as this is a foreign company, this is a foreign tech company. I think if you look at the history of private sector companies in India, the companies that have had the most positive impact in the country are the ones who have leaned in and said, we want to be a force for good here. We want to make sure that we are a constructive force for positive change in India. And I definitely see Facebook as an ally for India. No question about it. The country is in the middle of this exciting transformation. Digital is a big part of it. I honestly believe, Arnab, that between the Facebook app, Instagram, and WhatsApp, we're deeply immersed in the social fabric of India. It's difficult to imagine too many people for whom their day doesn't start with WhatsApp and doesn't end with WhatsApp. Therefore, we absolutely are committed to doing the right thing here. And we believe we are a positive force for change. That's one. Second, we respect local law. And I think this was, if you look at the last few months in the context of the new IT rules that were announced, I think we were quite vocal about it. And you have seen us as a company, and in fact, I would argue, Arnab, that in many ways, the actions of Facebook set the context for most of the tech industry as well, to look at the new rules and say, how do we comply with local law? And I'll go one step further, Arnab. I don't want to ignore it. Where we disagree, like we did disagree with the rule on traceability on WhatsApp, we leverage what the law allows us to do to seek guidance from the court. So even when we didn't agree with a particular element of it, where we believe there was a constitutional issue involved, we were actually still relying on the Indian framework to kind of go to the court and say, hey, we need more clarity here because we do have a disagreement here. So I do believe that it is possible for us both to be a neutral, non-partisan player, allowing for a canvas of expression for people who hold points of view across the spectrum, however we label it and however we define the categories. And yet, as a company, think about it as for a company and a family of apps that is so present in the lives of Indians across the country. How do we make sure that we are a positive force for good? I don't have a lot of confusion about it, Arnab.
No, I'm so glad. I think you were quite unequivocal where you said that you respect local law, respect Indian law, and I think that's the way it should be. I also believe tomorrow if there's an Indian company which operates or has a large market in America, we must respect American law while continuing to be bound to Indian law as well. And that's the way we must move in the future. Tell me one thing, Ajit. When you move, personal question to wrap this up, you move from Hotstar to, and viewers, if you just want to tell you, Ajit had a fantastic stint at Hotstar. He really was working with a large television company which made the transition to video, and the rest is history. And then he went from Hotstar to Facebook. So if there's someone who understands the future of video, it is probably Ajit. And Ajit, Facebook has invested about 6 billion in geo platforms, and you've launched Reels on Instagram. I'm just as a journalist also, I'm curious to know more about this. Is video the future? And I'm told people consume an insane amount of news on video, on Facebook and other platforms. So just 2 things I want takeaways for viewers today. One, your view on video. Are people going to watch a lot more than they read? And is that a good thing? Secondly, the visual storytelling, what impact will it have on journalism, on storytelling, on news, and what will be the role of social media there?
Sure, Arnab, and thank you so much for your kind words. Arnab, I suspect both of us grew up in an environment where we were told to read a lot of books, and I suspect both of us did. Yeah. I actually think this, hopefully people are still reading books, but your question, there's no question at all that India is a video first country. Yeah. And when I look at, the explosive growth of Hotstar, when I see the growth of Facebook Watch over the last few years, the growth of Reels on Instagram, video as a format is growing. I mean, we are probably at the spear end of that growth, even if you look across the world. And especially for a country like ours that is very young, people are embracing it as a format. And the interesting part is, even within video, you're starting to see distinctions of all kinds. It is not just episodic content that people are watching. It's not even long form, right? A 15-second or a 6-second video is as much a part of our daily expression and consumption as it is watching live news or watching a television show or a movie. So I do think video is a big part of it. And of course, all of that has been enabled by people having access to a good phone with a great camera and data being cheap. The other thing that's happening, Arnab, is we are starting to see a whole generation of creators for whom they're not, they're showing up and becoming producers and influencers and big sort of celebrities, all by using the camera in their pocket. And I think it's unleashing expression across the board. It's unleashing expression in parts of India for whom, the industry that, the formal television industry may have had all kinds of barriers. Your own story is of breaking a lot of the shackles, Arnab, but I think what we are seeing is the young generation is saying we don't want to apply to a producer in a broadcasting house to decide whether we are good enough to be on television. We have our camera, and all of platforms like ours and my peers are allowing them to do it. So I do think we are seeing the emergence of, I hate labels, but the creator economy is very real. I think we're at the early stages of an economy where people will have unleashed expression, and that will create pathways to all kinds of things, including the creation of new brands and spurring of commerce. Arnab.
Yeah, I have absolutely no doubt about it. I think the next decade we are moving towards really, really exciting times. What gets you going, in this job that you're in, Ajit? What gets you started? What's your biggest kick now? And for everybody watching this conversation on the social media summit, Ajit, predict a scenario. Let's not even look 10 years from now. Let's say 5 years from now. What are the 2 or 3 big things which will happen in 5 years which we don't have today?
I think one is what we just spoke about. I do think there's going to be democratization of brands and commerce in a way that we haven't even seen in the first 20 years of the internet. I think, if you look at how affinity was formed, Arnab, how brands were cultivated, how it finally led to the sale of goods and services, we have been used to a certain kind of format for the last 50, 60, 70 years. There's been innovation, but I think we're going to see explosive change on that, driven by a lot of things that we spoke about. The fact that there will be young creators that we haven't heard about yesterday, who 6 months from now will be a big celebrity, and they will have the ability to move how people think of a product or a category or a service. I think that's going to be a big thing. I think we're going to see deepening of a phenomena that we both have seen, which is that there will be an explosion of expression of all kinds. I think there's only one arc when you look at democratic expression in a country like us. People are going to have points of view, and they're going to find different formats to articulate it. And the third one that I think I'm particularly excited about is we are seeing the very early beginnings of the metaverse. We saw what the internet could do, and we are now starting to see that there could be an embodiment of the internet where we are going into virtual spaces, using devices like the Oculus or the Ray-Ban stories, the glasses that we introduced last week. And it's not just us. I think companies across the board are going to build different parts of the metaverse. And I think we're going to deal with an internet that's going to be a lot more immersive and interactive than anything we have imagined for the last 20 years.
Absolutely. You know, we are going, I have another phrase for it. I know you don't like phrases. We are moving towards a cyborg economy. we are going to move into a cyborg society. Next time we are talking, maybe we'll talk looking at each other 3D, wearing these special glasses. But you know, Ajit, it's, you know, what I find fascinating about this chat is, you know, you're a creative person with a keen business sense. And I like your commitment to our country. And I think that is what all major social media companies, digital companies should do. Respect the country which they operate in. It's so important. Ajit, thank you very much. I'll send you some feedback from this interview from our viewers, which we get. We'll send it back to you through social media. And great talking to you. Thank you.